Welcome back to the Product Marketing Festival. As we prepare to unleash another exciting session, I just want to say a massive thank you to our partners, sponsors, you, and our ensemble of speakers and participants for helping us bring this event to life. I hope you are finding today's sessions insightful, and I want to remind you that the learnings don't stop here. If you haven't already, you can become a PMA member and benefit from unlimited access to exclusive templates, frameworks, mentors, our entire back catalogue of event content, and much, much more. What's more, you can continue the conversation in the PMA's Slack community. If you aren't already a member, then hop on over and join the discussions today. And remember, this is your chance to get involved. Please share your feedback and questions in the comments section for our speakers to answer. It really is that simple. Let's resume the sessions.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Stephanie Perozzo, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Contentful, and I'd like to thank you for joining the session today. I'd also like to thank the Product Marketing Alliance for giving me this opportunity to present and for creating this platform where we as a community can share tips, exchange ideas, and open up opportunities to further develop and grow this really exciting field. Today, I'm excited to share a framework for how you can scale your messaging and positioning efforts that has worked for me and which will hopefully be helpful for you too, no matter which company size or stage of growth you're at. As we all know, product marketers are busy people, and the last thing that we should be worried about is whether people are using our messaging and positioning in the right way, or whether they're using the most accurate and up-to-date version. And finally, whether it'll evolve as your business grows. Before we start, I'd like to give a little bit of an introduction and some context. I'm a product marketer at heart, and I have been fortunate to have been given a lot of responsibility throughout my career, ranging from analyst relations to global sales enablement, covering both enterprise go-to-market motions as well as product-led growth. And throughout this presentation, I'll share some key concepts that I picked up while working at some of the most trailblazing companies in the marketing technology space, including Optimizely, Binder, and now at Contentful. And these principles have really shaped my view on how to scale out messaging and positioning. So with these learnings, I hope that it'll help you save precious time in your day-to-day, make messaging self-serve for your key stakeholders, and also build a foundation for messaging that scales. The assumption for this session is that you already have a messaging and positioning framework in place, and that you're evolving it and adapting it based on your company direction or customer feedback. In this session, we'll specifically focus on how you can go from awkward and potentially inconsistent messaging to really awesome messaging for all of your audiences in the most scalable way possible. So let's get started with understanding messaging at different stages of growth. And I'd like to draw the analogy of growth stages that we as humans experience, starting from adolescence to being grown-ups and becoming more experienced and tenured. At the startup stage, it feels like this image where everyone is building a rocket ship while it's in orbit. This is really a fun stage of the business when you're defining and redefining your messaging based on your new value propositions, new capabilities that you bring to market, and getting to that point of defining product market fit. It's the kind of stage when you're an adolescent where it's basically the hashtag YOLO period of one's life, where you're testing out new things, you're starting to understand your place in the market, and you might be a little bit rebellious and want to challenge the status quo. You're even picking out your own clothes because you're independent. You're trying different things on and defining that character. The challenge is that at this stage, you're also very impressionable. And you might want to try all the cool, new, hip, and buzzwordy things to try to fit in. And during this stage of the business, messaging typically falls victim to inconsistency. When change is the only constant, speed and flexibility are essential driving forces to keep up with the market momentum. But ensuring that you're authentic is especially important. Now let's move up to the next stage, scale up. This is when all engines are roaring and typically where us PMMs are brought in to make some messaging magic happen. This is the stage that Contentful is in right now. You're growing up fast and you're evolving and you're learning and you're establishing your position amongst your peers. In business terms, you're participating in analysts or market reports, and you're defining what you stand for. You're establishing your point of view. And you're also trying to get others around you to understand it. At this point, your old clothes, your old messaging doesn't fit anymore. And you're developing a more defined style and character. But the reality is, if people don't understand your position or perspective, those around you will make assumptions about it and define it. And this also means that as more people are involved with your messaging and positioning efforts, such as new hires or new leadership, or your VCs, your coaches that are getting you to that next stage, your messaging might be stretched or modified or redefined. And because of all of these forces, you might end up with awkward messaging that is inconsistent, potentially incomprehensive, or in the worst case, irrelevant for your audiences. And just like in the startup adolescent stage of the business, speed and flexibility are key, but also predictability. So as we move on to the next stage, we see how messaging evolves as you become more established in the market. Your messaging will take on a different form. At this stage, it feels like you've made it and the future is bright, mostly because you're not concerned about survival anymore. You're actually successful as a business. This is a point in life when you're ready to settle into a house, you've established a routine, you've developed skills which you're known for, but you're typically also a bit more risk averse. And accidents can become costly and you simply don't recover as quickly as you did when you were younger. So as mentioned before, at this stage, predictability is super important, but also repeatability and scalability. Because as your footprint grows, so does your span of control. And this opens up the door to a lot more risk as a business. A few lessons which I learned having experienced messaging at these different stages is that messaging is sensitive, it can get personal, it can also be political. And the most well-intentioned folks will want to have a say in it. But this raises the question, if everyone has a say in your messaging, who should anyone listen to? The second learning is that it's easy to lose control of your messaging, and the market and your peers will take it into their own hands and define it for you if it's unclear. Think about the time that you saw some rogue messaging being used on the website or in some sales collateral. So this begs the question, how do you gain control in the first place? And finally, if you don't have a way to manage your messaging, it will become diluted and potentially irrelevant for your target audiences, especially in the most critical stage of growth, from startup to scale up. So you may be asking, how do I avoid all of these terrifying scenarios? And what I've learned is that it comes down to these three key principles: categorize, atomize, and curate your messaging. You can apply any of these three principles today or at any point of your messaging journey. My recommendation would be to do them all together if you can, if you have the time and the space to do so. Nevertheless, if it seems that this is a very daunting task and a monumental effort, then applying any one of these principles will still get you a very long way. So let's dive into each one of these. Categorizing is really about building a taxonomy for messaging. Having worked in the digital asset management space at Binder, I know that the word taxonomy can seem like a very scary thing, but really you've already done this at the point that you've built out your messaging and positioning framework. In your messaging and positioning framework, you've probably built out top-level messaging supported by your value proposition, some key unique selling points, capabilities, and features. So there you have it. Half of the work is already done, but there's more. Categorization is about grabbing that foundational messaging document and untangling it to fit common themes or buckets based on how your audience will use it. And for this exercise, I'd recommend to start with some key use cases with the highest impact. For example, sellers are your number one partners in crime. So you need to understand where they struggle with your messaging today so that you can simplify it and organize it and make it easier for them to find and use. Getting clear on how you speak about your product is one bucket. Your differentiators or your unique selling points is another bucket. Key use cases and solutions, that's a completely separate bucket. Marketing are also your key stakeholders. You can't expect everyone in your marketing team to know the product or the customer or the market as well as you do. So helping them get messaging out to market is essential. Finally, external partners such as distributors or PR agencies would be in my top 3 priority list because they amplify and evangelize your messaging and market. And you want to help them articulate your value as clearly and as consistently as possible. Here's how our messaging taxonomy works. And you can see a level of hierarchy by the different labels, but also by the level of granularity of the different messages. For example, we only have one strategic company narrative, but we have a few key customer benefits and a ton of capabilities. And what helped me build out this taxonomy was our customer stories. One of our values at Contentful is start with the customer and work your way back. So when building out my taxonomy, I started looking at all of our customer stories, our public-facing case studies, and I picked up on a few patterns, which made me realize that our customers speak about the value that we deliver in very different ways, depending on which persona we're speaking to. So this helped me identify that KPIs can actually be split into 2 different buckets: business outcomes and platform outcomes, which are directly attributable to our platform. When building out your messaging taxonomy, build it around how people will use it. Understand common terminology used in your business and build a taxonomy around that so that people can find your messaging faster. Remember that time when someone asked you, where's that deck with that story about that customer and that really cool thing that they did? I think it was something about speed and APIs. Well, I need it for a presentation yesterday. And typically your brain starts to scan its own database and try to understand, is this the same story that we're talking about? Are we really thinking about the same things? Well, building a taxonomy will eliminate that ambiguity and lets you filter down based on the key messages identified. I personally think that creating a foundational messaging document is a great starting point. But then asking people across your business to go in this 20, 30, 40-page document, I hope yours isn't as long as ours is, but asking them to go and control find and filter through this heavy document, I don't feel that it's user-friendly. So instead, by organizing and categorizing messaging into certain buckets, you can make it easier to find based on the common terminology. And a taxonomy should really be built with the future in mind in case you launch new products or services or lines of business. You will also want to make sure that it is flexible enough to update and layer on additional information and messaging as your business evolves. Talking about flexibility, let's go into the second principle around atomizing your messaging. Atomizing your messaging is about breaking it down into small chunks. It's not just about parsing a PDF or a Word document into sections. Atomizing is about turning your messaging into meaningful standalone bits that can be used anywhere in any context. You should be able to read it on its own and it be self-explanatory and comprehensive. When you do this, what you'll want to do is break down your messaging. And when you think that you've broken it down enough, break it down some more. By doing this, you're creating messaging that is reusable. And this is what's going to be a real time saver for you as a product marketer. This mindset is something that content strategists evangelize because it makes content reusable and thereby also consistent. This is also something that Contentful pioneers, and it's create once, publish anywhere approach. So I have my employer to thank for helping me as a product marketer think about messaging in this way. Breaking it down lets you create a library of messaging to choose from that can be used dynamically in various formats and in different scenarios. And an important part of this entire process is building a model for how messaging relates to each other. I was fortunate enough that my manager felt that scaling messaging at this stage of growth of the business was important enough to invest software into. So rather than creating these unwieldy, long messaging docs that can quickly become outdated, we were able to invest in something called GrokSpark, which is basically a messaging hub built by product marketers for product marketers. And what it does is it helps you build your messaging taxonomy, like I showed you earlier, and then atomize your messaging to start building a database. And from there, you can make however many combinations you want, whether it's for sales enablement collateral or for website or campaign briefs. And you can make sure that your messaging is consistent across all of these different touch points. To round off, if you want your messaging to be used everywhere, you have to make sure to break it down into small chunks so that it can fit anywhere. My main tips here would be to have a multi-channel mindset for your messaging. Think of all the possible places where your messaging could live, such as your website or your podcast description, or potentially even external review sites on a mobile app or in a CTA. You'll want to ensure that you can add new information over time. And as I mentioned, a live doc with view-only permissions is better than a PDF because a PDF will become quickly outdated and it's really hard to track if somebody has downloaded it once onto their computer and you're not able to find and retrieve that to update it again. My last tip would be make sure that you have a way to assemble messaging. We use GrokSpark for this, but you can also use a messaging library, deck, or document, or sheet. With this approach to atomizing your content, you're bound to get more mileage from every bit of messaging that you produce. And you won't be creating net new every single time. It'll be more about putting the ingredients together than having to run out to the shop last minute, try to buy all the ingredients for a 5-course meal right when the shop is about to close. Nobody needs that kind of pressure. So now that you've categorized and atomized your content, it's time to curate. The last principle that we're going to cover today is about curating your messaging for audiences. And when thinking about messaging for key stakeholders, it's a perfect opportunity to step back and do some discovery work to understand what your audience really need. Investing in knowing your audiences and walking them through what you have, all your categories and all of the different messaging ingredients that you have will help you understand how they envision using it in their daily operations. And it will also make sure that it's adopted. At this stage of our messaging journey, I did 3 things which brought me back to my Optimizely roots. I segmented my audience into 3 groups based on the biggest impact. Sellers, because they have the direct contact with customers, marketing to drive consistency across channels, and our partner ecosystem who amplify our voice in market. Then I did some research to understand how they're using messaging today. And finally, I built out some hypotheses and tested out the approach with focus groups. I shopped around some templates, got feedback, did workshops, and landed on some key artifacts that they can use in a self-serve way, which I will show you now. What we're looking at here is spinning up messaging combinations, literally in under 5 clicks or in about 20 seconds, where you choose the messaging variables upon which you want to actually base your content. And there you have it. So remember that time when someone asked you, do we have that customer story around scalability? And because requests like this are unpredictable in product marketing world, we should be prepared for any scenario and any messaging request for any audience. Creating and curating upfront will help with that process. For partners, we realized that we needed to provide them extra guidance around our messaging. And it's kind of like brand guidelines, but it's really about our messaging and positioning. So when one of our partners reached out to us, thanking us for the messaging document that we created, this is when I personally did a little happy dance. One of our partners wanted to use our messaging for a campaign that they were working on, and they didn't need all of our messaging details and everything. They needed a curated, shorter version, and we made this available via our partner portal. And it's so rewarding to see that our messaging is expanding beyond our four walls and into our partner ecosystem. And the best part is that having this live link on our partner portal makes sure that they always have our latest messaging and positioning, regardless of whether we update our tagline or boilerplate. And at Contentful, we're in the fortunate position that we're the leading content platform that pioneered headless content management. But when you're going through this crazy rapid growth, you need to make sure that your internal stakeholders and your external stakeholders have the latest and greatest messaging so that they can evangelize it and amplify it in market too. And as a next step, I'm really excited about continuing this messaging journey with different teams across the business, such as our sales engineering team, who will help refine and further strengthen our messaging, as well as our developer relations team, who are already going into our messaging hub and helping us refine and prioritizing our messaging for certain audiences. All in all, messaging is a team sport. And I'm fortunate that teams across Contentful also see the importance of scaling our messaging consistently across the business. My main tips for the curating part of your messaging is consider how you can have a live link versus a static PDF that can become quickly outdated. And see how you can drive adoption by building messaging templates that are self-serve, easy to edit, potentially with filters or dropdowns, so that you can drive messaging adoption across your business. So to round off, remember these three principles with your messaging efforts. In a fast-paced scale-up environment, when you're gearing up for the big leagues, you want to be ready for any kind of change and build a categorization structure that will stand the test of time. Atomize and break down your messaging, and then break it down some more so that you can easily reuse it and save a ton of time when you're spinning up messaging combinations. Finally, make it as easy as possible for any audience to use by curating artifacts that will drive adoption of your messaging and positioning framework so that you can drive messaging consistency during this critical stage of growth. This is only the beginning, and we have big plans for our messaging and positioning as we scale. All of our marketing and campaign briefs are already being informed by our messaging hub, and we're also aligning all of our messaging across sales enablement materials. As a next step, we want to ensure that our customers have a smooth and consistent messaging journey all the way from our website through to our in-product experience. The best part is that we now feel confident that we're going to be able to skip that awkward, inconsistent stage of messaging and fast track our way to awesome as we scale. Why? Because we've already built a solid foundation from which we can continue to build upon. Thank you so much for joining the session today. And I hope that these three principles will help your messaging efforts go from awkward to awesome as quickly as possible. And if you ever want to chat or share ideas, please don't hesitate to contact me via email, stephanieperozzo@gmail.com, or via LinkedIn. Thank you so much.